I'm Abby. I'm a Senior Reserve Officer here at Shropshire Wildlife Trust. We're up at Betchcott today to celebrate 1 year of our new nature reserve and to have a look about what's been happening over the past 12 months. Betchcott Hill's important in Shropshire. It's situated really well. There's the Longman to one side and then it acts as almost like a stepping stone over then to Stiper Stones at the other. And it's a great reserve just as another opportunity to restore habitats and expand the ones that are up here that are great and into a bigger area really. The wet flushes that we have on Betchcott are quite important. We're hoping to extend them as part of the work that we do and really wet them up a bit more by filling in this ditch that runs along the fence here. But they're great breeding habitat for curlew and other upland birds. There's been a couple of skylarks this morning, and then we're hoping to increase the breeding areas and maybe protect the curlew a bit more and hopefully then see them breed in a couple of other places with other upland birds. There used to be a conifer plantation down just behind me, and we had it felled for quite a few reasons. One of them because of the upland birds we have up here and the curlew and all the other ground nesting birds. It acted as a bit of a predation shadow. You'd get a lot of predators that would be able to hang out in there and the nesting birds wouldn't be as aware of them. So it just reduced the risk and helped our breeding birds if we felled this. Also, as part of restoring the habitats and linking up more of the woodland, it would have been more beneficial to have broadleaf trees and a more diverse habitat than conifer plantations can be, although they obviously are good in some situations. These are the remainder logs that we have left. A lot of them have been used in the ditch that's just on the left here to slow the flow. Some of them will still be used for that and will work the whole way up, but we've only just done the bottom section so far. So eventually these will disappear. We're just downhill and in the next field across from where we felled the conifer plantation, and as part of our licence and for the works that we needed to do, the Forestry Commission requests that if you're clear felling something that you replant. We'd planned to do this replanting anyway because we were wanting to link up a more established route from the woodland that's in a dingle down there to the woodland that's here and then wraps around this bottom field. We thought this was a great location to then create a better band of trees. There's a mixture of all sorts in here. They're all natives. There's some holly, some oak, some hazel, some hawthorn, some rowan. There's a whole range that you find on the site just to keep it more in keeping. And all the trees that we've got are also all British grown and British sourced from seed. So you reduce the risk of diseases that are coming over from Europe or wherever the trees are sourced from normally. And they're supposed to have a better survival rate because they're already established to the climate. These are only from South Shropshire, so they're not that far away. And over the coming years, hopefully, they'll all flourish and then this will become a nice established woodland. And then because there's a stream that runs at the bottom, we're also hoping the willow that you see in the back and some of the alder will also spread their way up through the wetter areas. There'll probably be more willow and alder this side, and then more of the oaks and hazels and ashes in this section here. So we graze the fields here on Betchcott with a local grazer who actually farms the next field across, and he brings his cattle on from about April to November. It's our first year doing the grazing, so it's probably going to change over time as we see what the fields, how the fields react to everything. But we're not doing intensive grazing at the moment. We're only working on about 15 cattle and then being in a field at a time over that period. And they're great because obviously the grassland is still quite poor in some areas in that it's not very rich in wildflowers or have much diversity, and the cattle are going to be great because they'll eat the grassier species. The grassier species. And because we'll only have them from April to November, it gives a chance then for the spring flowers to come through and increase the diversity. Cattle are also great because of their cow pats, so they can fill the fields as much as they want. And they're great for nutrients, they're great for invertebrates, they're great for fungi, they're great for all sorts of things. So at the moment we're working on that plan, and then in the winter the cattle can go in the dingle up at the top of the site, and there'll be probably less cattle up there, but they can work their way through that, trample the scrub and the tussocks that are up there and open up certain areas to help increase diversity up there as well. But it's just going to be a working plan. This is the first year, we'll see how the ground reacts, and then we might change the grazing a bit more, and maybe restrict them from the wet flushes if they need a bit more recovery, or let them spend longer on the hill if the weather's better. We have one main ditch on site that runs right in the middle of the reserve from top to bottom down to a stream that then heads down to the river. And I think previously on the farmland it was all about draining it, draining all the wet flushes as much as they could to improve the grassland for grazing the cattle on. But obviously now we're looking at restoring the habitats. We want to extend the wet flushes and really re-wet the fields. The conifer plantation that we felled, the timber we have from that has been used to put in some leaky wood barriers all the way through the ditch, although at the moment only the bottom corner's been done. And they're great because they slow the flow of water down, they allow silt material to build up and just allow that water a chance to spread before it heads its way further down the stream. And eventually most of the ditch will be filled up with these barriers, and in some sections completely infilled, so that the water coming down from the top has a chance to spread, meander its way down, drop silt and improve our flushes, and then head on down to the river. So this winter, one of the main jobs we've been doing is installing some new fences. One of the reasons is to just reinstate our boundary fences, because this used to be a much bigger farm. So some of the fences were internal and now they're external, to ensure that our boundaries are secure to prevent grazing stock meandering their way through. We've repaired a bit of that. But also up here, the other side of the fence is the portway that runs all the way along and eventually ends up on the Long Mynd. And we decided to fence along the side of it for a couple of reasons. One is that we're going to put an accessible track in on this side, so that it'll be accessible to everyone all the way up to our viewpoint, which is just the brow of the hill a bit further on. And we thought it would be easier to maintain if we kept this separate and with the portway, which we're also going to do some work on. This will look very different by the summer, hopefully. But the other main reason is because we have all the ground nesting birds. We wanted to make sure that they could be undisturbed. During the breeding season, everyone's still going to be able to come up and walk along the portway and head to the viewpoint and walk into the dingle. But these fields are going to be closed for the breeding season, just to allow the birds to hopefully have a more successful breeding period. And then in the winter, the other walkways that we'll put in from the viewpoint that'll go all the way around the reserve will be then opened up again. And then also a third reason of having these fences is for our cattle as well, who will be on no fence collars, so there's a limited possibility that they would stray, but just in case, we've put this fence in as well to protect the portway. So we've done a lot of practical works up here over this past year, and a lot of that wouldn't have been possible without the volunteers that we have. They've been up throughout the year with Carl, who's another reserve officer, and he's been running work parties to take out some of the existing fencing that's not been that great. They've been cutting back the rhododendron that's at the bottom, which is an invasive species. They've done a fab job clearing that out, and in the dingle they've been opening that up, getting rid of some scrub and clearing the fence out that's been running down the middle of that isn't needed anymore. We've also had our monitoring volunteers coming out. They've unfortunately came on very, very wet days, but they did what they can to survey the botanicals in the fields, and they're coming out later in February to remap some of these wet flushes just to make sure we've got the data exactly right with what we have at the moment, so we can then look at what happens over the coming years. But a lot of the work that has been done wouldn't have been possible without them. We are very grateful for all of their support and enthusiasm, especially on wet, miserable days that unfortunately they've had a lot of this past year. It's my favourite area of Betchcott Hill. I think will probably be the dingle, which is right at the start, and it runs down the length of the hill on this side. And I think it's just great down there. There's a lot of more diversity than there is at the grassland at the moment anyway, with future works that'll hopefully change. But there's like patches of heath, there's like wet woodland down there, there's a stream that runs down the middle, and it's a proper little haven for all sorts of wildlife, for the birds, invertebrates, mammals, everything. Obviously over the coming years we're hoping that this will become equally as diverse, but at the moment the dingle's my favourite. We also want to say thank you to all of our members, funders and supporters for enabling us to do all the work that we can up here and helping us restore the habitats up on Betchcott Hill.